At dinner, my fiancé's dad said, "You'll need to pay us a monthly family fee." She whispered, "Please don't embarrass me." I looked at her, smiled, and said, "Consider yourself free." Then her dad started. I still remember the smell of roasted salmon and expensive perfume hanging over that polished mahogany table. The night was supposed to be simple, an engagement dinner with Lila's parents, a final toast before we sent invitations. Her mother had laid out crystal glasses, gold-plated cutlery, even handwritten place cards with our initials. Everything looked perfect, but the tension in that room could have cracked glass. Her father, Mr. Caldwell, sat across from me in a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my car. He wasn't eating. He was studying me like a man about to make a business offer. The silence between courses grew thicker until he finally leaned forward, tapping his spoon against the plate. "There's one more thing we need to discuss before the wedding," he said. His tone was casual, but his eyes weren't. "In our family, we have a tradition. Every husband contributes a monthly family fee. It's symbolic, keeps everyone invested." I thought I'd misheard him. A family fee? I looked at Lila, who immediately dropped her gaze, fiddling with her napkin. Her mother smiled stiffly, like this was all normal. He went on about continuity, respect, and shared responsibility, as if he were giving a TED talk on greed disguised as culture. I asked him how much this fee was. He answered like he'd rehearsed it. $2,000 a month should do. It covers family gatherings, emergencies, and the upkeep of our shared property. Lila's hand brushed mine under the table, trembling. She whispered, barely audible, not to argue, that it was just his way. But the look in her eyes wasn't love or embarrassment. It was fear. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a one-time discussion. It was a deal being closed, and I was the asset. I pushed my chair back slowly. "You're joking," I said. But her father didn't flinch. He just folded his hands like a man used to getting his way. Lila's mother tried to smooth things over with fake laughter, pretending it was a misunderstanding. But the silence that followed told the truth. This was planned. They expected me to accept it, like a test of loyalty. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and said something I hadn't planned. "Consider yourself free." I stood up, looked directly at Lila, and repeated it calmly. "You're free." Her father blinked, confused, and her mother gasped like I'd just cursed in church. Lila froze. The entire table went still. Then I walked out. I didn't shout, didn't explain, didn't wait for her reaction. I just left through the front door into the cold air, the kind of air that bites when you realize something's over. My footsteps echoed down their brick driveway while her father called after me, not with concern, but with anger. By the time I reached my car, he was behind me. His polished shoes clicked on the stones. "You think you can humiliate my family like that and just leave?" he said. His voice dropped lower. "You'll regret this." He grabbed my arm, but I turned, shook him off, and got in the car. He leaned toward the window, his face twisted with something between rage and panic. "You'll learn what loyalty costs, son." That word, costs, stuck with me. I started the engine, left the driveway, and didn't look back. But the night didn't end there. When I stopped for gas an hour later, my card was declined. That didn't make sense. I had more than enough in my account. I checked my banking app and froze. My joint account with Lila, the one we'd set up for wedding expenses, was empty. Every cent gone. The transfer history showed multiple payments, all to Caldwell Holdings. The transactions had been authorized yesterday, before the dinner. That's when I realized the dinner wasn't about family or even tradition. It was a setup. They'd emptied the account before confronting me, expecting I'd cave to their fee once the money was already in their hands. The performance, the pleading under the table, it was all part of the act. I called Lila. She didn't answer. Then, around midnight, a text came. "Please don't do anything stupid. It's not what you think." But I already knew exactly what it was. The next morning, I woke up to find my work email flooded. My company had flagged unusual financial activity linked to my name. Apparently, several pending credit applications using my credentials had been filed overnight. Not just small ones, either. Business loans, property leases, even an auto financing request. All under my name. All with Lila's father listed as partner. It didn't make sense how they'd done it so quickly. Then I remembered the dinner, when her father had joked about needing a copy of my driver's license for wedding insurance paperwork. I'd given it to Lila to forward to their planner. I thought it was harmless. Turns out, it was ammunition. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Lila called, sobbing. She begged to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe, and the moment she saw me, she broke down, saying her father had gone too far, that she didn't know he'd use my information. I sat there, listening, but all I could see was her expression from the dinner. That silent compliance, that pleading look not to embarrass her. She said she could fix it if I just stayed quiet for a few days. He'll transfer it all back once things calm down, she said. But when I asked what things meant, she looked away. That pause told me everything. Before I could respond, her phone lit up with a message preview. I caught a glimpse, a message from Dad. It read, "He'll crawl back once the bank calls." She panicked and flipped her phone face down. That was the last time I ever met her alone. As I walked out, I saw her father's car parked across the street, engine running. He wasn't even hiding it. He just stared at me through the windshield, then smirked before driving off. That night, my account was officially frozen pending investigation. I sat in the dark of my apartment, surrounded by unopened wedding invitations, realizing that I'd been engaged not to a woman, but to a family who saw me as their next revenue stream. And somewhere in the distance, that same family was probably celebrating another business victory. But they didn't know something important. I still had one card left, a piece of information I hadn't told them. My cousin worked for the same bank handling their Caldwell Holdings account. And by morning, he'd tell me something that would change everything. The next morning, my cousin called before sunrise. His tone was sharp, serious, stripped of all small talk. He said that the Caldwell Holdings account had shown several large incoming transfers within the last 24 hours. Exactly the same amounts that vanished from my joint account. It wasn't just money laundering. It looked like preparation for collateral. Money moved quickly to appear as liquidity before applying for a business loan. They had used my financial credibility as the guarantee. He warned me not to touch anything or confront them directly yet. But staying quiet wasn't my strength. I wanted answers. I wanted to look Lila's father in the eyes and ask why he thought I was just a walking wallet. By midday, I drove to Lila's apartment. The blinds were drawn, the place silent except for faint music behind the door. When she opened, her eyes were swollen, her hair unbrushed. She said she hadn't slept. Her father had promised to fix everything. She told me to stay calm. Something felt wrong inside that apartment. Boxes were stacked near the entrance, some marked with my initials in black marker. One box was filled with documents from the catering company, the decorator, the venue, everything we'd prepaid. Yet the receipts showed double charges. 2 separate payment records for the same services. One from me, one from a company named Caldwell and Daughters. The total amounts were slightly off, but the math matched just enough to look legitimate on paper. They were billing me and reselling the same contracts through another channel. My wedding payments had become their side hustle. That afternoon, I received a call from a floral studio confirming an upgrade to the wedding setup, tropical arrangements, gold arches, imported orchids. I told the woman there was a mistake, that I hadn't ordered any upgrade. She said it was authorized by the bride's representative and charged to the same card on file. When I told her to cancel, she hesitated and said the deposit had already been wired. It was clear, while pretending to apologize, Lila was still using my account. The anger didn't even feel hot anymore. It was cold, clean, focused. I drove to her parents' house. The gates were open, the driveway lined with 2 new cars I'd never seen before. One had the dealership sticker still on the window. I didn't even need to guess whose name was on the financing. Inside, voices echoed from the living room. Lila's father and a real estate agent were finalizing paperwork. They didn't even pause when I walked in. A large map of a new condo development was spread across the table, with approved stamped on several pages. I saw my signature photocopied at the bottom. My employment contract was attached as proof of income. My social security number, my work ID, even a falsified pay stub, all there. They were renting luxury property under my name. Her father finally noticed me standing there. He didn't panic. He smiled. The agent looked uncomfortable, excused herself, and left. The room went silent except for the ticking of the clock. He told me I should think about my future, that this arrangement benefited everyone. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. If you just cooperate, the noise about your finances won't have to go public. I didn't understand what he meant until the next day. The company's HR department called, informing me they'd received an anonymous email with screenshots of text messages suggesting I had been emotionally abusive toward Lila. None of them were real. They looked almost believable, but not quite. Phrases I'd never typed, conversations that never existed. Still, HR had to investigate. My access to company systems was suspended as a precaution. That evening, a few colleagues unfollowed me online. 2 friends texted short messages asking if I was okay, followed by silence. It was the kind of quiet that smells like suspicion. Lila came to my apartment unannounced, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses like a child playing hide and seek. She said her father had acted on his own. She said she'd never approved the screenshots or the financial mess. She wanted to talk. I didn't invite her in. We spoke through the half-open door. Her words were flat, rehearsed. She said her family was desperate, their construction company on the edge of collapse. She said the family fee was his way of saving them. The rain started as she spoke. The hallway light flickered. I asked how long she'd known about it. She hesitated long enough for the answer to surface on its own. When she left, she said she'd fix it, that I'd get my money back soon. Her tone was soft but hollow, like someone repeating lines in a play they no longer believe in. Hours later, my phone vibrated. A social media notification appeared. Someone had tagged me in a post. My profile picture was attached to a thread filled with those fake screenshots. Comments flooded in within minutes. Half disbelief, half outrage. My inbox filled with messages asking what I'd done. It was clear now. The Caldwells weren't protecting their image. They were destroying mine before I could expose them. I called my cousin again, desperate for advice. He said the transfers from my account had already been moved onward, split into smaller payments to multiple accounts under different names. By morning, it would look like nothing ever happened. He told me to gather whatever documents I had and stay quiet until he could contact someone higher in the chain. I didn't listen. At noon, I went straight to the florist's office, asked for the receipts and authorization records. The clerk recognized me from the news feed and looked nervous but printed everything. Every charge led back to one digital signature, Lila's mother. Next, I stopped at the real estate agency. The same agent from before refused to talk at first, but slipped me a copy of the signed lease, whispering that she wanted nothing to do with this mess. I left before anyone could stop me. That night, Lila's brother, Owen, texted me from an unknown number. His message was short, almost guilty. He said the situation was out of control, that his father was planning to teach me a lesson if I kept interfering. He said he couldn't say more, but wanted me to know the screenshots weren't random. They were pre-planned weeks before the dinner, a contingency in case I turned uncooperative. That was the moment everything clicked. The dinner had never been about tradition or negotiation. It had been an unveiling, a moment to see whether I'd submit to their control. When I walked out, I triggered a sequence they'd already prepared: financial sabotage, reputational ruin, and emotional manipulation. Every move was designed to force me back under their thumb, desperate enough to compromise. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor surrounded by receipts, contracts, screenshots, trying to piece together the story like fragments of a bomb that had already gone off. By morning, a new notification appeared on my phone, an email from Lila's father's address with the subject line, "Still time to make peace." The body contained one line: "Your career or your pride. Choose wisely." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Something inside me shifted that day. The fear burned away, leaving only a strange calm. They wanted control. They wanted silence. They expected submission. Instead, they were about to get something else entirely. The next evening, I accepted a call from my HR manager and told her I wanted to schedule a meeting to clarify everything face to face. Not to defend myself, but to make sure the truth came out publicly. Before hanging up, I said one thing she didn't expect: that I'd be bringing guests. The trap was already setting itself. The meeting with HR was set for Friday morning. I arrived early, suit pressed, folder in hand. Lila's father probably expected me to walk in desperate, broken, ready to apologize and beg for my job back. Instead, I walked in calm, steady, and prepared. The HR director and the company's legal counsel were already waiting. Both wore the same expression, polite distance mixed with suspicion. They'd seen the screenshots. They'd read the posts. My reputation had been quietly shredded over the past week. But they didn't know the other side of the story. I placed the folder on the table and started talking. No emotion, no anger, just facts. Copies of contracts with my forged signature, timestamps of transfers from my account, florist and venue invoices showing double payments, the fake lease under my name. I showed them the email from Mr. Caldwell threatening me to choose wisely. For a while, no one spoke. The legal counsel finally leaned forward and asked where I got all this. I said I'd been gathering evidence after discovering my fiancé's family had used my financial information for fraudulent applications. I told them the fake messages circulating online were retaliation, an attempt to destroy my credibility before I could expose them. The HR director's expression shifted from suspicion to something closer to alarm. She said they'd need to verify everything, but that this was far beyond a company matter. Before leaving, I told them one last thing. There would soon be a public statement clearing my name, and they should be ready for it. That afternoon, I reached out to an old friend from college who worked in social media marketing. We'd collaborated years ago on crisis management campaigns. I told him what happened. He listened quietly, then said I was sitting on a viral story, one that could flip the entire narrative overnight. By that evening, we drafted a plan. I'd record a short, direct video explaining the entire situation, not a rant, not revenge porn, just calm truth. Every claim I made would be backed by documents shown on screen. The florist's invoice, The lease with my forged signature, the bank transfer logs, the threatening email. We uploaded it at 8:43 p.m. The response was immediate. Within an hour, it spread across local feeds. People recognized the name Caldwell Holdings, a construction firm known for questionable deals and political connections. Viewers started digging through public records and posting their own findings. The tone of the internet flipped like a switch. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain in a cheating scandal. I was the target of an extortion scheme disguised as marriage. By midnight, thousands of comments poured in: disbelief, outrage, fascination. A few even mentioned seeing Lila's father at charity events, always playing the role of the respectable businessman. Then came the second storm. Lila's father called me just after midnight. His voice was low, trembling with anger beneath forced calm. He said I'd made a mistake exposing private matters, that his lawyers would deal with this defamation. He said I'd regret humiliating his family. I hung up mid-sentence. The next morning, a message appeared in my inbox from Owen, Lila's younger brother. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another warning. But the message was short, desperate, and different in tone. He said he wanted to meet in person, somewhere neutral. He said he had something I needed to hear. We met in a parking lot behind a grocery store. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He said he couldn't stay long, that his father was in panic mode, calling every contact to suppress the story. Then Owen handed me his phone and pressed play. The audio was rough, but the voices were unmistakable. Mr. Caldwell, in his study, talking to his wife. He bragged that he'd handled me with fake screenshots, that no one would ever trust a man accused of emotional abuse. He said once the scandal died down, they'd sell the condo bought under my name and use the profit to keep their company afloat. He even laughed about the family fee, calling it the best way to test a man's compliance. Owen said he'd recorded it 2 nights ago after hearing them argue about which one of them should take the fall if things went south. He'd had enough of their manipulation and wanted out. I thanked him, asked if he was ready for what would happen once the recording went public. He nodded and said he didn't care anymore. He just wanted it over. That evening, I uploaded the audio, paired with subtitles for clarity. No commentary, no caption, just the recording. Within minutes, the internet erupted again. This time it wasn't curiosity, it was outrage. Local news outlets picked up the story by morning. The headlines were brutal. Prominent business family accused of extortion scheme. Caldwell Holdings under investigation after viral recording. Lila's father tried to defend himself publicly, claiming the recording was manipulated. But the damage was already irreversible. Former business partners began distancing themselves. A local reporter uncovered multiple unpaid subcontractors, and lawsuits quietly settled over the years. Everything he'd built on intimidation and deception began collapsing overnight. Lila herself went silent. No calls, no messages. Her social media disappeared entirely. The only sign of her came through an email, a brief, emotional note apologizing for everything, saying she'd been trapped between loyalty to her family and fear of losing me. She said she never wanted to hurt me, but the lies had grown too large to escape. I didn't reply. I didn't hate her. I just didn't believe her anymore. Meanwhile, my company reinstated me after verifying the evidence. The HR director personally apologized and promised to help restore my professional standing. My friend managing the campaign turned my story into a case study for online reputation defense. Ironically, the same internet that once nearly buried me was now holding me up. But even victory felt heavy. Every message of support carried a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything over someone else's greed. The next day, Owen called again. His voice shook. He said his father had gone unhinged after seeing the news, throwing things, screaming that his own son had ruined him. Owen was leaving town, staying with a friend out of state. He didn't sound scared. He sounded relieved. That night, I drove past the Caldwell property out of morbid curiosity. The mansion that once intimidated me looked smaller now, its lights dim, gates slightly ajar. A for sale sign leaned crookedly near the mailbox. Through the window, I saw a movement, silhouettes pacing, shouting. The empire of control was eating itself alive. I parked for a moment, then drove away without stopping. The next morning, reporters camped outside my apartment building. I didn't speak to any of them. The headlines could tell their own story. I'd already said enough. But the story wasn't done yet. There was still one message waiting in my inbox, unread until that night, from Lila. The subject line, before it's too late. It wasn't long. She said she was leaving her parents' house, that she had something to tell me in person, something that would change the way I saw everything. She asked me to meet her at the same cafe where we'd met weeks earlier. Against every logical thought, I agreed. Not for closure, not for sympathy, but because I needed to know what was left unsaid. When I arrived, She was already there, sitting in the corner booth, wearing the same engagement ring she'd never returned. She looked nothing like the woman I'd planned to marry, smaller, pale, hollowed out by guilt or fear. She didn't waste time with apologies. She just said one thing, that her father wasn't finished. And that's when the final twist began to surface. The cafe was nearly empty. Rain hammered against the windows, blurring the reflection of passing cars. Lila sat still, clutching a paper cup she hadn't touched. I slid into the seat across from her. The air between us was heavy with things neither of us wanted to say first. She looked up slowly, eyes red, voice barely holding steady. She said her father wasn't finished, that the recording had humiliated him so badly he decided to finish the job properly. In his world, revenge wasn't emotional, it was procedural. Lawsuits, false claims, long games of attrition. He'd already filed a defamation suit that morning and was preparing to accuse me of fraud, saying I had forged his signature. I asked her why she was telling me this now. She said she couldn't watch him destroy me anymore. Then, almost whispering, she added that she'd made a mistake the night after our engagement ended, one she couldn't undo. She said she was pregnant. I didn't react. The word floated across the table, cold and detached. She didn't even try to say it was mine. Instead, she said she didn't know whose it was. There'd been another man, a friend, one her father had introduced to her during a business event months earlier, when he started doubting that I would play along. I understood immediately. She hadn't been in love, she'd been managed. Groomed to keep options open, to secure financial security no matter which way things went. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. It was insurance, a backup plan that had now backfired. She looked at me, as if expecting forgiveness. All I said was that I wished she'd told me the truth before it turned into this war. She reached for my hand, but I stood up before she could touch me. The cup in her hand trembled. When I walked out, she didn't follow. Outside, the rain had turned to a drizzle. I took a long breath and realized I wasn't angry anymore. There was nothing left to fight. Only consequences. That night, my lawyer called. The bank had officially frozen all Caldwell accounts after multiple irregularities were confirmed. Loans, payments, and collateral transfers that violated every rule in the book. My cousin had escalated the matter to federal investigators. Caldwell Holdings wasn't just facing defamation anymore. It was under full financial audit. Within days, news broke that several projects under the Caldwell name had been suspended. The State Finance Board launched an inquiry into tax evasion and fraudulent property registrations. The company's website went offline. Mr. Caldwell made a statement on local TV, denying everything, claiming he was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a vengeful ex-fiancée. But the reporters pressed him about the audio recording, the leases, the forged contracts. His answers fell apart. When he walked off camera, the mic was still on. The last thing caught on tape was him muttering, "They'll regret this." His wife filed for separation the next week. Owen disappeared completely. No social media, no contact. I assumed he'd left for good. For me, the following weeks blurred into routine. Meetings, interviews, statements. People treated me differently now, with caution, respect, curiosity. I was no longer the man accused. I was the man who exposed a family empire. But that victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. One evening, while leaving work, I noticed an envelope taped to my car window. Inside was a note written in Lila's handwriting. No apology, no accusation, just a few lines. She said her father had lost everything, that he was being investigated for multiple financial crimes. She said she was moving out of state to stay with relatives until the baby was born. She didn't ask me for anything, only wrote, "You were right to walk away." I folded the note and put it in my jacket pocket. I never saw her again after that. A few months later, an investigator from the finance board called to thank me for providing the original documentation. He said the evidence I'd given them didn't just implicate Caldwell Holdings. It led to uncovering a chain of shell companies tied to construction fraud across 3 states. He told me my case had sparked a wider probe. I told him I wanted nothing more to do with it. The day they officially filed charges against Mr. Caldwell, I drove past their old property. The mansion was gone, bulldozed for redevelopment. The once perfect hedge maze was now an empty field of dirt and debris. Only the gate remained, rusted and bent, still bearing the Caldwell nameplate, half broken, hanging by one screw. Standing there, I remembered the dinner, the gold plates, the arrogance, the moment he demanded his family fee. All that power had turned into dust. I didn't feel joy, just closure. Weeks later, I moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. It wasn't luxury, but it was quiet. I started running again, taking longer hours at work, helping new hires get adjusted. For the first time in months, my days didn't revolve around damage control or revenge. They were ordinary, something I'd almost forgotten how to appreciate. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a reporter from a national outlet covering the Caldwell case. She asked if I wanted to comment now that the trial date was set. I said no. She told me they'd uncovered more offshore accounts, falsified ledgers, and that Mr. Caldwell had finally been arrested. I thanked her, hung up, and went back to cooking dinner. 2 days later, Owen emailed me from a new address. He said his father had been sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. His mother had moved to a smaller town. Lila had given birth, a daughter. He didn't know if the baby was healthy or if Lila was still with the other man. He ended the message with, "You probably don't care, but you should know you were the only one who ever told her the truth." I didn't respond. Months passed quietly. Occasionally, someone at work would mention seeing my story online or an article titled, "The Groom Who Fought Back." It never felt like it was about me anymore. It felt like something that had happened to someone else. One evening, I stopped by a cafe near the river, not the same one where Lila and I had met, but close enough to remind me of how full circle life can be. As I waited for my coffee, I noticed a television mounted in the corner. The news ticker read, "Former contractor convicted in multi-million-dollar fraud sentencing." The photo was unmistakable. Mr. Caldwell, handcuffed, being let out of court. People around me were talking about the story, shaking their heads at how a respected businessman had fallen so far. No one recognized me. I liked it that way. When I stepped outside, the evening air was cold but clean. I walked along the water, listening to the faint hum of traffic, the rhythm of normal life returning. Somewhere, miles away, the Caldwells were paying for every lie they'd built. I didn't keep souvenirs, no recordings, no documents. The only thing I still had was the folded note from Lila, tucked deep inside an old jacket pocket. I never read it again, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away either. Maybe because it reminded me that I'd survived something that once felt impossible. At dinner that night, alone but at peace, I raised a glass to no one in particular. Not for revenge, not for justice, just for freedom, the kind that comes after you stop trying to fix people who were never broken, only built on deceit. Outside my window, city lights flickered across the water. The world had moved on. So had I.